Hi everybody, welcome to a new episode of Talk O'Clock. I'm pretty much done with all the papers and the canvases, so any kind of surfaces that I do paint on regularly. So the next step I thought would be going into another medium that I use frequently in my studio, and that is watercolors. I know that there are, very many people starting with crayons and watercolors when it comes to painting, since at least back in my day when I was at school, these were the media that we were asked to buy for lessons in school. So I still do have a couple of those watercolors from back in the day, and I can't even fathom that I still have them, that I still use them. That some parts are already empty, but some are not, and the colors are still good. So let me hop into what I use. And again, if you're new to the channel, this is just me telling you what I use, and I'm quote unquote famous for not buying everything of a certain medium. So if I like one, I don't buy any others. And I usually, surf the internet quite a bit and check for reviews and other artists talking about what they liked about a medium or not before I even buy. So I do have a very limited supply of watercolor stuff, but I do, and I have different kinds of. I do have the, excuse my comparison here, I do have the Twingo, and I do have the Rolls Royce, if you know what I mean. And everything has its place. I don't buy the cheaper and not so high quality watercolors because I can, but because I want to use them for certain things, and I don't need the high quality things for these kinds. So let's go into the low quality watercolors, and these are actually the ones that I had back in school. And now let me think. That was 1996. So yeah, 20 years later. The pots are, some of them you can see they're pretty empty, but some I didn't use yet. Those are the low quality, like student quality watercolors that you can buy in Germany and I guess other European countries. And when you go to school here, you're asked to buy that particular brand so that teachers can compare, blah, 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 you know? So these are the lower qualities, and I did buy an updated set last year. So these are all the colors that are in there, and you can see I use them quite a bit. But all the pots are still full. I'm missing the white again, and I'm not rebuying the white of the color of the student quality, but I'm going to get into the whites separately in a few minutes, so I'm not gonna go into those. These colors are great if you wanna start trying watercolors and not spend, a lot of euros or dollars. They do have their place in my paintings still, so I'm not always using the Rolls Royce. If I want something to be very watercolory or very fade, not highly pigmented, I tend to use these kinds of watercolors, since they are way less brilliant in their finish. They're kind of quote-unquote chalky. They're not glossy, they're very matte, they suck into the paper quite a bit, and they just have their place for all the things that I really want to have fading out into the background or whatever when I do watercolors. I usually don't make a piece of only with only these colors. I usually have something else going with it. It being a different medium, if I go mixed media, it being my Rolls-Royce watercolors, which I'm going to go talk about in a few, or even my watercolor pencils. Because if you want to have structure, depth, definition with these kinds of very, very low quality but usable watercolors, it's very difficult to achieve it. So they're usually just one tool to get a nice background done that I want to have not standing out whatsoever. Also, I use these for huge, if I have, let's say, a mixed media page, and I have quite the size of paper, so DIN A3 or 50 by 70 centimeters, like really big surface that I gotta cover with, or that I want to cover with a layer of watercolors, I'm tending to use the low quality watercolors just because I can, well, I don't have to use the expensive ones. I can keep those for the real quote-unquote painting stuff and not just putting down a colored surface. So there's a place for those student watercolors in my studio. And again, frequently, pretty much, I'd say 70% of the time when I paint either a mixed media with watercolor parts, or if I do a watercolor only piece, which pretty much never happens because I always have a different medium in there. Again, the whites, but I'm gonna get to those. I use that, well, I'd say 70-75% of the time I do have those low quality watercolors somewhere in the painting. They're not going to be on the focal point though. On the focal point, and I'm very proud to own these, and they're just like my precious when it comes to watercolors. They're from Schminke, which is the artist professional quality of watercolors, and they come in this metallic tin here, which is very nice to clean and very heavy. It sits well on a table and whatnot, and it's small enough to go into my travel bag. So I do have pretty much the same colors than I do with the student grades. There's a different kind of blue, otherwise they're pretty much the same. So I got the light blue here, but I do have two different dark blues here that I can light up or mix with green. But it's pretty much the basic 12 sets that I do have of those, and they're enough. I can mix pretty much any color, and if you watch the acrylic reviews, I said over and over again, I'm trying to get rid of certain colors. I'm pretty much at the state where I can, or where I feel very confident to mix all the colors I want on my own, because I know colors. When you're a beginner, that's maybe something you don't want to focus on, so I get it, and I was at that point. I pretty much never was at that point with watercolors though. Weird thing, I don't know why, I can't explain it, but even back in the day, way before I started acrylics, I had the color wheel and how to mix everything down with watercolors, but for whatever reason, I didn't trust myself to do the same thing with acrylics right away going in. Weird brain, I can tell you that. So anyways, these are the Rolls-Royce, like I say. These are high quality watercolors, quite expensive, I have to say. But you can see already here on the cold red, they're quite glossy. They always look wet. They have quite a bit of honey or oil in them that makes them really nice and smooth and shiny. Although these are really dry right now. So when I go in with water, they're highly pigmented, so my colors will be way more vibrant, and I have to use a ton of water to fade them out and make them look bland and well, make them look as if they were student quality. So now you know why I use both. Both. Gosh, talking. Hold on, coffee. Not the greatest talker this morning. Why I use both versions of watercolors in one painting. If I don't want to use these to water down, like way water them down, just to have a fade look on my page. If I can use a lower quality watercolor and pretty much achieve the same thing without having a bucket of water on my paper, you know. So these are for the focal point. These you can see I mix quite a lot of things, and I don't clean my palette here because I use these colors to have backgrounds or have shadows on other paintings that I do. I just mix the whole lot together and use it as a perfect gray or something. You can see I hardly ever use the black. The pot is still full, as well as this one and the cool green. I'm very much using the cold yellow, the cold red, and the cold blue. So these are the pots that I might have to rebuy first. Again, this is a very nice color. If you don't mix it with too much water, you can almost get a look of a marker, almost a Copic or a Faber-Castell artist pen. It's very solid, it's very smooth, and really brilliant with the color. It's amazing. It's almost as if you don't use watercolors, but very liquid acrylics. It's the weirdest thing. So you could pretty much have a watercolor painting and then use the watercolor with almost no water, and then have like an outline of something that you do as you would with a marker. So it's very nice. You could even use it for mangas and whatnot. It's amazing. So I really like this brand and this type of watercolors, like the real professional, highly pigmented, very soft, very smooth watercolors. They're great. And I use them quite a bit, even with mixed media. I go in and I use the high qualities if I work on a focal point. There's one thing, if I wanted to have a watery look but even more highly pigmented, I'd go to pastels, and I'm going to talk about that in the pastel section when I film the video. But there's one thing that I personally cannot achieve with watercolors, which is a watercolory look with not too much water. Like, I want to get rid of the bleeding look of watercolors, which you sometimes want to achieve, and that's actually why I use watercolors. But I want to have the smooth blending into each other look, but I still want to have the vibrance and the brilliance and the strong colors. And I do have trouble achieving that with watercolors anyway. However, I have a solution there that works fine for me, which is using pastels with watercolors together. And they behave nicely together. They don't clot the watercolors, the tins. You don't ruin the brushes. So there is another mixed media solution that I use watercolors for, that I only accent with the watercolors, and I have the main painting done with pastels. And if you let me know if this totally confuses you and you just want me to have a painting done on my channel, just watch a video of this pastel chalk and watercolor mix that I was just trying to explain what I want to achieve there and how I do it. If you just want to see it instead of me just trying to explain, let me know. I'm happy to shoot a video and have it on my channel in like no time. That's no problem. But yeah, I have to know if you're even interested in something like that. So the next thing that I use is Art Grip Aquarelle Watercolor Pencils from Faber-Castell. They are high quality. So these are pretty much the Rolls Royce, not of the tins, but of the pencils. And you can see I even murdered one here. There's one missing because I used it. Funny enough, I'm not using those to do watercolors. I'm using those to do drawings, under drawings, and whatnot for acrylic paintings, or sketching anything out in my art journal that I use acrylics or other media with. That I'm not really using those for watercolors. It's totally weird. And that's because, well, they're water soluble. So when I go over that, whatever drawing I did with acrylics, I don't have any pencil marks or whatnot on my canvas, and I can just erase with water and have almost always something like an outline or something like a shadow if I have very light colors. So I do use watercolor pencils for anything but not watercolors when it comes to those. I know I should use those on watercolors and they are amazing, but I just don't, and I'm totally weird with those. Anyways, but they are in my section on the cupboard or on the shelf where I do have my watercolor stuff, so I grabbed them since maybe one day I'm gonna use them on watercolors. I do have another set of pencils that is way more colors. These are 24, those are 12, now 11. And those are only student or very low quality watercolor pencils. And these I use quite a bit when it comes to shadows and accent, where I need a really, really fine tip, or if I want to draw in a line that I don't want to bleed with the rest, though I still have wet paper, or that, well, I want to fade or blend into the rest of the painting only the slightest bit. So if you apply these or any other watercolor pencil on wet surface, you can't really blend them out as much. They are not bleeding. They're very good to have a nice line, say, of a rose petal, or maybe some architecture, or some very fine tree lines, or just twigs of whatever wood. It's way easier to apply those with the watercolor pencils than with the thinnest of brushes. So I use them for that kind of work on my paintings. I don't use them that much. I did in the beginning, but not anymore really, to, well, draw something out or use the pencils only to draw something out and compose a painting, and then going over parts with water and fading whatever color out, I don't know, from very dark purple to a very light pinkish violet color. I'm not gonna do those with the pencils because it just takes too long and I don't get the flow that I want. However, if I want to make a painting where I can't stand bleeding colors or having these blooms, you know, that you sometimes go for in watercolors, if I do some artwork where I don't want that and where it would ruin whatever I'm painting, I might go back to coloring the surface, the dry surface, with the pencils first, and then going over it with the water very, very carefully. It might be something like a comic, a cartoon, a manga, something like that, where you have very defined lines first with ink or with permanent marker, and then you go in watering it with watercolor, and you have a tiny surface, not a lot of space to work with a brush, and you can't have bleeding parts together. So there might be that case where I'd use them not for accent and detail, but to actually color something. But again, those are low quality, but they do their job. They're pigmented enough to well, to work on watercolor surfaces. It's great. There's a variety of colors here, 24, like I said, and there's some that I use more often than others. That's also, well, go figure. But they are nice and they're high quality enough for the work that I do. There's only one pen in here that I'm not using with on wet surface to accent things, and that is the white one. Watercolors, if you're new to that medium, you should know that it's very difficult to paint white with watercolors unless you have a white watercolor. Usually you don't use black or white in watercolors when it comes to nature. Nature paintings don't have black that much. It's the darkest browns, the darkest blues, the darkest purples, or the darkest grays, but not black. And the same goes for white. It's very difficult to highlight in watercolors if you have, well, what other, anything but snow. If you paint snow, you just leave huge surfaces unpainted or white, paper white. Anyways, but having tiny highlights can be quite difficult. And first I tried the pencils, and they don't really work on wet surface. So what I do is either wait until the painting is dry and then go in with that pencil on dry paper and highlight then, and maybe fade out the white a tiny bit with more water, but usually I don't. I just accent and highlight with a dry watercolor pencil, and that works for me. But I don't do that often, because usually I do have, I want to fade out the highlight, and I usually have a bigger surface, not just a tiny, like the reflection in the eye of somebody that I'm painting. I usually don't paint people with watercolors too, that's the point. So here's where the mixed media comes in. I'm using either acrylics, zinc white, which is a mixing white and it's not opaque, or I use white gouache, which is opaque. These are the two media that I use for white, for highlights in watercolor paintings. If I want something like a cloud, where I want just a faded white-ish part of the painting, that's the one. If I want to have a really solid white dot or something, again, like with a reflection in the pupil of a person, I go with those. This could last me 2, 3, 4 years. I use not a lot of gouache in painting, since what I paint usually doesn't have a lot of white highlight that is opaque white. I use the zinc white or the mixing white for acrylics way more in that matter. So this is how I work around not having white watercolors. Again, I'm not using white a lot in watercolors, but that is because I paint subjects from nature most often, and that would be, or a scenery, a landscape, whatnot. I'm not going often. I'm talking often. I'm not going with animals or architecture a lot with watercolors. It's mostly, it's either abstract, it's flowers, or anything tree-like, any scenery, any water surfaces, whatnot, that I'm usually painting with watercolors. So, yeah. And now I'm pretty much done with my ramble on about what I use watercolors for. And again, please let me know if I should do one of those videos where I mix pastel chalks and watercolors to show you what I meant with the trying of the explaining part. So yeah, thanks for watching all the way to the end. If you have any questions, any other comments, anything you want to let me know, use the comment section below. I would be very happy to answer any comments there. Otherwise, it would very much help if you liked and or shared this video with fellow artists or art lovers or anybody interested. If you know somebody, whatever, ramble. That's very, very highly appreciated by me. And if you haven't already and want to see more of those weird videos, or actually see me do artwork, see me cook, or see me talk board games with my husband, subscribe to the channel. That would be very, very nice. And yeah, that's that. Again, thanks for watching. Have a very good one. I'm going to see you very, very soon with a new video. And now I gotta go paint, because these fingers are itching for artwork. Goodbye. Have a good one.